I do net a couple different ways that I do net sheets depending on where I'm at in the transaction. Um, I think the biggest thing that people probably have a trouble with is how to come up with the state deed tax. That's probably like the biggest question I get is how do you figure that out? Most of the other fees that sellers pay are pretty standard and traditional, even from title company to title company. They don't typically vary a whole lot. So even if you don't know exactly what title company you're using, you can use kind of some standard range of fees and be pretty close. Since I typically use Flex Title, they have a great tool on their website to do a net sheet. So I'll show you that way, and then I'll show you another way that is an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll share the Excel spreadsheet after the class, or have Michelle post it somewhere so people can access it. It's one that Steve taught me to use years and years ago, and you can actually do like some side-by-side comparisons. Like if the house sells for this price, this is what you'll net, and if the house sells for this price, this is what you'll net. Sometimes it's just easier to have those side-by-side comparisons and not having to do a Flex Title sheet for every single purchase price. So if you are under contract or your seller is accepting an offer and they want to know exactly what they're going to net, I recommend going to myflextitle.com, and you actually have to create a username and password. So you can see here that I'm actually logged into their website. And once you log in, you'll see this link right here called Seller Net Sheet. So you just click on that, and then it asks you for a little bit of property information. So I'm just going to do one of my current listings. It's the South St. Paul house that I just sold over the weekend. So the buyer is purchasing with financing. The sales price, the closing date, and all this stuff actually does matter because it'll impact like your proration of property taxes and all that kind of stuff. Your mortgage payoff amount. And if there's a second mortgage on the house, the other thing that is considered a second mortgage that people sometimes forget about is if the seller purchased the house and had down payment assistance, if there's any sort of like silent second that needs to be paid off at closing, say they got $10,000 from MHFA as down payment assistance, that's potentially a second mortgage that's being held on the property that needs to be paid off at the time of closing. So that number needs to go in there as well. Commission, and you can separate out the listing side from the buyer's side. So I'll just put in some kind of standard fees. And then there is actually a place for our fee. If there's an association, it asks you what the dues are. Are they monthly? Are they current? Is there any sort of resale certificate fee or any transfer of ownership fee from the association? So that's super handy. I'm not going to put that in because this property is single family. There's no association fee. And then property taxes. I actually don't have the taxes in front of me for this, so I'm just going to make it up. Let's say that they're $3,500 a year. And it asks you if the taxes are paid. So I would say that if they're escrowed into their mortgage payment, they're at least paid for half the year. And we know in Minnesota, property taxes get paid in May and October. So depending if they're paid for half the year and you tell it that, it'll also do your proration for you as far as like when the closing date is. So I think it's smart enough to do that. And then if there's any other expenses, sometimes maybe like you've paid for something that the seller is going to reimburse you for, you can put that on there as a fee. There might be like, oh, like if you paid for a Tish or If you paid for like a pre-sale home inspection, or if there was like a handyman repair or something like that that got done that you're going to be getting reimbursed for, you can put those expenses on here. And then you just hit calculate. So here it tells you your sales price that you put in, what the closing fees are by the title company, conservation fee, and here's that state deed tax. State deed tax is actually 0.0033 times the sales price. So if you do the math on that, that's how that number is. That's how they get to that number. Then it shows the payoffs, brokerage fees, the transaction fee. And then this is where your proration of taxes comes up, and it tells you what your proceeds number is. You can actually email, you could download, you can change the title on here. So you can do all sorts of stuff to make this look pretty professional. And I think it comes out in a really good format. Does anybody have any questions about that? It's super straightforward.
I have a question about, so if I look at, who most of my clientele is, it's first time home buyers. So for me to have a seller who's maybe doing like a buy and a sell, like I'm understanding how to do a net sheet for the sell, but then is that more of like the lender's thing of like helping them understand, like, here's what you're getting from the sale of your home, but how will you be affected by your new purchase as well? I don't know.
Yeah, so this isn't the same as like a lender's estimate, as far as like, if the lender is giving them a good faith estimate or something like that on their purchase. But if they're selling and buying, this will tell them if they're going to use this money towards their down payment, then this tells them, okay, you're going to have roughly $23,000 left over to use as your down payment on your purchase.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I just have to like say these things out loud so it like absorbs in my brain. So
yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so this, if they go to sell their house with their mortgage payoff, their title fees, their commissions that they pay, this is what they end up with at the end after all of that. Okay. Truly their net proceeds. So this is one way of doing it. And I typically don't do this until I have an actual sales price or purchase agreement. So when I'm meeting with somebody in person and say I'm doing a listing appointment, like number one question you get in a listing appointment is, how much am I going to make, right? Either what's your commission or how much am I going to make on the sale of my house? So Steve actually created this spreadsheet years and years ago, and it has formulas in it to help a seller figure out how much they're going to make. So depending on, typically you go in and you're like, okay, I think your house is going to sell somewhere between this price and this price based on comparables, after walking through the house, all that kind of stuff. So I have 3 columns set up, and with kind of prices in that price range of where I think their house is going to sell, the commission rate, their current mortgage amount, and then depending on what kind of loan it is, I factor in sometimes another mortgage payment. So we all know, like with FHA and VA, well, really with any kind of loan, you're making your payment in arrears, right? So you actually get the option to live in the house before you make a payment. But that payment often has to get made up at the end when you go to sell the house. So it's pretty common that I'll put an extra month's mortgage payment in here. So I'm just gonna pad this, right? So I don't know for sure that $1,500 is their mortgage payment. Like I'll ask them what their mortgage payment is and I'll put that amount in there because there's typically interest that needs to get paid at the time of closing, depending on the closing date. It's also prorated, just like the taxes and insurance are prorated. If there's any seller paid closing costs, there's a place for that in here. If there's association dues, there's a place for that in here. Association prep fees, there's a place for that in here. Brokerage fees, this is a lump sum, and you can see up at the top here, this is actually a formula based on the sales price. So they took B12, which is the sales price, times B9, which is the commission.
Hey, Nicole,
Yeah.
could you, a lot of us are still seeing a frozen flex screen. Could you reshare your
Oh,
sheet? Sorry.
no. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, let me stop the share and redo it. Sorry. Okay, is that better?
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay, I'll start over. Okay, so I usually put like the property address in here, commission rate. So here we have the 3 columns that I was talking about for potential purchase prices. The sales, the remaining mortgage balance that they currently have on their home, 1 month's interest or mortgage payment. And then, so say that there's $5,000 in seller paid closing costs. You can put that in there. Say they have association dues of $250. You can put that in there. And let's say there's a doc prep fee. Here's the commission. That's a formula based on the sales price and the commission. So that's actually a formula that's programmed into this. And then we have closing fee from the title company. And that's a couple of the fees bundled together. So that's not just the closing fee. I think there's a few things that are bundled in there. State deed tax is a formula. So it's the sales price times 0.0033. That's the Minnesota state deed tax formula. And you can see that it changes in these different columns because it's based on the sales price. Abstracting updating fee, regulatory compliance fee, deed recording fees. And then this is kind of a couple months estimate of prorations for their property taxes. So when you find out what their property taxes are, divided by 12, put 2 months worth of property taxes in there, depending on when it's closing. And you can tell people, like, you're doing this at a listing appointment in front of them, tell them like, hey, this could change depending on what month we close in, or whether you've paid your property taxes or not, or things like that, right? And then of course there's the $5 conservation fee. So then it totals all the expenses, and this includes the mortgage payoff for their current mortgage, and then it subtracts it from the sales price. So again, these are formulas that are factored in to, I don't know what this 2,800 is. These are formulas that are factored into this spreadsheet. And I always check this, like check the formulas to make sure that they look like they make sense. So this is a really good way, like if you're in a listing appointment, somebody's going to ask you how much they're going to net out of the sale of their house. Like you can't just look at them blankly, right? So this is a good tool. It's not web-based, so you really can pull it up on your computer. You could do it before you go and print it out, things like that. But But if you get to the house and you printed it out and you're like, oh, your house isn't worth what I thought it was worth, then you don't really have a way to redo it. So like when I go to a listing appointment, I always bring my computer with. I might prep this in advance of going to my listing appointment, but then I have the ability to manipulate it on the fly if I have to, just because what you think the house might be worth before you go there may not be actually what the house is worth once you get there. I'm sure most of you have been in that situation where you're like, oh, this house is either way nicer than I thought it was going to be, or it's not as nice as I thought it was going to be. And you can even do like, hey, this is an as-is price, or like, if you put this, this, and this into the house, this is what I think you'll get. So you can do an as-is price and you can do a fixed up price. And you can show them kind of the difference of what they could get in those scenarios. Anybody have any questions? Nobody?
Nicole, this is awesome. Thank you so much for taking time to do this. I just wanted to mention too, if you're like, hey, what's your current mortgage amount? Lean on the lenders. Lenders pull credit reports. Mortgages are on credit reports, up-to-date information. Second mortgages are on credit reports. There's a lot of information that the lender can give you to prepare an accurate net sheet.
Yes. That is if they've talked to a lender.
Well, there's that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I can give this to Michelle and she can post it online somewhere if it isn't already posted. Probably in agent resources somewhere, we can get it out there. The number one thing I'll tell you, if you're using this spreadsheet, like obviously save it to your computer, but when you open it to change it, make sure you do a save as and you change the name of your file, because otherwise you'll be writing over your net sheets that you've done for your clients. And then when you have to go back and reference your net sheet, it won't be there. So I highly recommend doing a save as and changing the name of your net sheet.
For the 1 month's interest amount, is that something that you're asking the seller, or is this something that I've failed to keep in memory from schooling?
No, I just asked them what their current mortgage payment is, and I put that amount in there.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So it's purely just a ballpark number
Okay.
based on what their current mortgage payment is.
Okay.
Colin, would you agree that they have to make up for that interest at the end of their loan? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, and I mean, I would say nobody likes to be surprised in a bad way.
Yeah.
Well, I thought we were going to net, I thought we were going to net 7,200. Now we only net 5,000.
Yeah.
Right? I'd much rather have people be surprised where it's like, oh, actually, that's more than I thought. Awesome. I mean, that's the rule of thumb that I've lived by on the mortgage side. Send somebody docs. It's like, okay, these are our closing costs, They're probably going to be a little bit less than this, but this is where we're at right now. So I would always pad in, 1 month's interest amount. I think you're on the right path there, Nicole. You could never be wrong.
I never want to underestimate. Like I never want to tell them that they're going to net more than they're actually going to net, right? Because then at the end of the day, you're the hero because they net more than what you told them before. So I don't think padding this with, a couple $1,000s is a bad thing. Because you're also kind of guessing on the proration of property taxes. The other thing to keep in mind too is depending on what month they close in, they'll get a refund from their escrow account. So you could tell them that, like, depending on when your taxes and insurance are paid, when you close on this, you'll get a check within like 4 to 6 weeks from your insurance company or from your mortgage company with your remaining escrow balance. But there's no way to really document that on here. Did I see that Matt was on here? Oh, Jeff. Jeff, do you have anything to add for this?
No, I think you did a great job. Sorry, I was kind of in and out. I had to print some stuff too, but it was all helpful.
Okay. And of course, like if you have trouble with the worksheet or if you have other questions and you're working on it for the first time, anything like that, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or your pod leader and we can help you through it. Anyone have any other questions?
This was great. Thanks, Nicole. I'll make sure that
Thank
we
you,
get it
Nicole,
posted for
super
everybody.
helpful.
You are welcome. That's
Thanks,
it.
Nicole.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good day.